Battalion Chief, one district, been here since 1989. I came to work August 1967. I was in 34s. Made second driver in 1969, came here at Fuller Station. It was a double engine house. I rode 12 engine. Then I made driver 1971, went to a truck. Then I was drafted to go to EMT school and put on the first ambulance in October 1972. Went to the first paramedic class January of 1974. And I rode a ambulance, MICU, rescue, whatever the terminology was. I made lieutenant in 1977, went to Oak Cliff to 14s, and it was a double engine house on 13 engine. I was there about a year. They took 13 engine out of service, and I went to Squad 3, Manfire Squad. Then we moved over to 8s on Squad 8. I stayed there till I made captain in 1980, went to 48s. And I ended up getting drafted and going to training. I was an academy commander at the drill tower. I made battalion chief there and stayed in training in charge of hazmat, ARF, all the in-service training, rookie school. There was 450 rookies came through when I was out there. 1986, I made a chief in 1983. 1986, my son got on, so I transferred out of training, went to Battalion 3 for 3 years, and then I was drafted and pulled down here in 1989 and been here ever since.
Experience. You've been in Battalion 1 since 1989, and so
Yes.
I would venture a guess that there's probably not another individual in this department that has as much downtown experience right now as you do. Is that fair?
That's fair to say. Plus the time I was a second driver. That was my first high-rise fire riding the seat in 1969. We had the old Southland building on the 17th floor. That was my first actual high-rise fire.
Tell me a little bit about what you think makes high-rise firefighting so challenging. What are the things when you get a high-rise box that you're either thinking about or concerned about the most?
Well, let me start off by saying that one of the issues that I see is that we get complacent in what we do. We might go to an automatic alarm 6, 7, 8 times, same building, and we think, here we go again. But that's the issue we can't afford to have in any of our structures or any fires we have, but mainly in high rises. You can't get complacent and get off without getting dressed, getting your clothes on, carrying your equipment in, because sure enough, one of these days you're going to have one. It might be that 900th time you go on one that you actually are going to have a fire in there. So complacency is the issue you have. You have to look at it. Every run down here is going to be might have a fire there. You can't say that you've been there umpteen times and you won't have one. So that's the main thing. You have to have the mental ability to be able to think about having a fire every time you go in there. Hoping you're not, but you better be prepared that you are going to have one. You have to train constantly. We train here on B shift all the time on high-rise fires. That's one of the things we have to do because we have to know what we're going to do when we get there. Some of the big issues you have if it is a high occupancy structure, then you'll have to deal with rescue. My priorities are just like they are on any fire. The 5 priorities we have is rescue, exposure, confinement, extinguishment, and then overhaul. You can't get out of sync on those things. You can't go thinking about, I'm going to extinguish it. If you have fire coming out a window on the 12th floor, that's fine with me, because I know where the fire is and I know what I'm going to do. I know that we're going to hook up and we're going to push the fire out the window. It's the ones that you don't know. And that's another issue that is one of the main concerns, is the smoke that we have in the buildings. We have to identify which stairways we're going to be using. We have to identify how we're going to be able to ventilate. If we're going to cross ventilate, or if we're going to have to break a window out to force air out of there, get the smoke out. Those are the challenges that we have. Another issue we have is, for some reason, some of our people think we don't need a backup line. That is a sure thing. We don't go to South Dallas on a 900 square foot house and not have a backup line. Those are our procedures. I have been in fires when the windows break. Wind coming right on top of you. I won't send the companies in unless we have a backup line. As we all know, the procedures we have with 2.5 inch and straight bore, it takes 6 people to move that line around. Well, the 2 on the nozzle might be protected, but the people behind them are not if we don't have a backup line. So that's one of the things I won't do. If we're going to have 2 lines in before we actually go inside after we investigate what we have. Ventilation, as I mentioned, that's one of the priorities that we have to think about when we first go in. We have to consider it, and that's one of the hardest tasks we have, is getting the smoke out of the building, and we have to be on top of that.
What are your considerations or tactics that you might apply if you feel like that an elevated vent is pressurized by wind, and maybe you've got a high-rise floor that might be setting itself up to be a wind-driven event when we open up that compartment?
Yes, I mean, that's one of the main things that I try to deal with, is pressurizing the stairways, pressurizing, get everything set up before you actually make the attack on the fire, to be able to push it out the windows. You know, that's one of the things that, when a window does break and it's coming, the wind is pushing it, it is a lot of force, especially if you're up on upper floors. So if we can pressurize it and get enough in there that we can, when we start our attack, to do it. Now, if the window's not broke, then we have to start the game plan on using stairways on the other side, whichever way we can get an attack on it, to cross it and push it out to roof access. So all that has to come in. That's when I get right back to what I'm talking about, the 5 priorities. Sometimes we forget about that, and we just open that door up and start putting water on it without considering the other part of pressurizing it, open the stairways up, the roof access, to make it where we can attack the fire from a safe point of view. If we try to think about, I'm going to go open that door and go in and put out that fire on the 13th floor, well, it might be the best thing to leave that door shut until you get everything set up the way you want it and go. You know, it goes back to the simple, basic 101 fire science. You got to have 3 things to have a chain reaction. You got to have the fuel, you got to have the heat, and you got to have the oxygen. So if you leave that door shut, you might not have that oxygen in there, so you might not have the fire. But if you open it, that might be all it takes for it to really get rolling. That's how we have backdrafts. That's how we have flashovers.
So one of the things I feel like I'm hearing you say is that it's high-rise firefighting in some ways is counterintuitive to our culture. We really are hard charging, let's get in there, let's put it out now before it gets worse. And it sounds like you're saying you want your guys to exercise some patience.
Right, and we do. And I know it's hard. You know, I've had to stand at the door and not let them in until we get the backup line, till we get an ideal. We've investigated the other stairway. We've tried to figure out what the game plan is before we hard charge in there to do it, you know. It's kind of like a football team. You know, the first 20 plays in a game is script written. You got them written down. The coach has got them. This is what we're going to follow, you know. So that's what we need to do. We need to follow. That's the reason we have procedures. But we don't follow those procedures, then that's when we get in trouble. I mean, there's other aspects to the high rise that we have to consider. One of the things is once we do get it put out in the overhaul phase, we have to remember one of the things that I emphasize a lot of is we have to check for carbon monoxide on every floor before we let anybody back in or before we let our people start pulling their masks off. Sometimes we forget about that. One of the difficulties of high rise that we kind of ignore is basement fires. We think about, you know, upper stories, but basement fires are a different animal now that you have to fight in a high rise fire.
You've had a few in the Adolphus over the years, haven't you?
The Adolphus and many others that we've had, because normally that's where all your electrical panels are. And everybody knows